every single one of our major customers and minor customers all shut their doors overnight.
You need the right people in the right place at the right time. And sometimes you have the right people in the right place, but at the wrong time.
I've got to keep going forward. I've got to keep looking for revenue streams. I've got to keep looking for growth, keep looking at new ways of doing things.
But, what's the culture like at the business? What do we stand for, the values?
I've got to tick that box on my personal development program I don't really want to be here.
Scaling up a business isn't easy. If it were, we wouldn't have less than 4% of businesses scaling beyond 10 employees or around £1 million turnover level, and less than 1% beyond 50 employees. But the contribution that we make as owner-managers to our economies is immense and should never be underestimated. Yet it can be a tough gig for all of us at times, and only other business owners truly understand the challenges that we face. And through ScaleUp Radio, we aim to help make things a little easier. We interview guests who have been where you are now and may have faced some of the challenges that you are facing. And they offer their thoughts and advice on what has worked for them, as well as what didn't. And we've also combined many of the lessons from these interviews and also through working with hundreds of owner managers over the last 10 years or so into a practical scale-up handbook that we've called the Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System, or ESUS. And it's for owner managers like you and me as we navigate our own scale-up journey. And you can order a copy through your favourite online book retailer or by going to all the W's, esusgroup.co.uk, www.esusgroup.co.uk. On this week's episode of ScaleUp Radio, I talk with Ahmad Qayyum from Bluewater Accounting. And Bluewater Accounting specialise in the property sector, working within all aspects of the industry: landlords, property investors, construction and trade businesses. And Ahmad started the business in 2017 after working in the corporate sector. Now has a team of 9 serving 140 plus clients. As you listen to Ahmad's scale-up journey so far, you'll hear that he's no stranger to risk, but it's a risk and risks that have definitely paid off. And Ahmad has a great way of working around a problem, looking for a solution rather than simply just accepting that's the way things are. And we cover an awful lot of ground in our conversation, including things like the process and particularly the value of determining your niche within an industry and how networking can solidify your place in that niche. How to react to the realization that the staff that you have aren't the right ones for the business, and how that expensive lesson in terms of recruitment can help you with future recruitment. And we also talk about working with teams remotely in different countries in Ahmad's case, and how do you keep everyone working as one to the same values and the same goals. And this is just a fraction of what we cover. There's some really good lessons from Ahmad, covering a lot of those 4 pillars we talk about in terms of scaling up: the strategy, people, execution, and cash. And what I think you'll find also really interesting in our conversation is that Ahmad is one of a rare breed of accountants that we've spoken to, in that he's not just an accountant by any means. Actually, he comes more from the angle of being passionate about being an entrepreneur and a business owner and a business leader rather than being an accountant. And it'll be really interesting to invite Ahmad back in a few years' time to see how he's progressed from where he is now. Welcome to another episode of ScaleUp Radio. I'm here with Ahmad Qayyum of Bluewater Accounting. So Ahmad, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Kevin, for having me.
Hi, you're welcome. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. So, Bluewater Accounting, there's a bit of a clue in there, but what's it all about? What do you do at Bluewater?
So, Bluewater Accountants is a firm of chartered accountants. We specialize in the property sector, and we work with landlords, property investors, and property developers, as well as construction and trades businesses, and architects and surveyors. So as I mentioned, we're a firm of chartered accountants, but we're not your typical accountants that kind of do just your year-end accounts and file your taxes and so on. What we like to do is we like to really get under the skin our clients' businesses and really help them to understand their numbers and help them to make decisions from that data, which will then enable them to grow their businesses. So it's, the kind of services that we offer, as well as accounting and tax, is kind of more the day-to-day numbers, the monthly management accounts, the quarterly management accounts, the financials. We also provide an outsourced finance function to our clients. So especially small businesses, they don't have the necessary resources to build or to employ their own finance team. So to employ bookkeepers, to employ management accountants, to employ finance directors and so on. So what we do is we provide that outsourced service because they don't necessarily need a full-time person in each of those roles. They just need a small chunk of a person in those roles. So what they can do is they can outsource the services to them, and they'll get a small chunk of, say, a bookkeeper, a management accountant, as well as all the way up to like FD level services. That's what they can get from us.
Very, very good. So there's a couple of things there that sounds like differentiate you from the run of the mill sort of accountancy. One is your specialism, so in the property sector, and then the other in terms of that really focusing on helping your clients to make better decisions on the numbers rather than just do the simple compliance side of things. Is that fair?
That's spot on. That's right.
Yeah, good. So can you give us an idea of the size of the business, maybe in terms of clients or employees, whatever you feel comfortable in sharing, Ahmad?
Sure. So in terms of clients, we've probably got around about 140 clients. And in terms of employees, we've got, there's altogether 9 of us in the business. So there's 5 of us here in the UK, but we've also got an outsourced team as well. And we've got 4 of us that work, 4 people that work for us full time, but they're based remotely overseas.
Very good. And when did you start the business?
So I started the business back in September 2017. So yeah, it was August 2017 when I left my full-time job. Started the business in September 2017. Started out alone. And so for the first year, it was just me by myself. In the second year, a year later, September 2018, I took on my first employee. And then 2019 and so on, we just grew then and kind of built up the team from then.
Yeah. So that's fantastic. That's pretty decent growth in that period. And can you? I know you said that your clients are all in the property sector, but can you give us an idea of what a typical client looks like? And maybe in terms of what they do, but also in terms of the size of the client.
Sure. So obviously the nature of the clients, because we've got 3 different segments, they all slightly differ. So typical kind of property investor, landlord type clients, we work with people who've got at least 3 to 4 properties or more. And so, those are the kind of clients we work with. And, our largest client, they've got around about 60 plus properties in their portfolio. Right. And then in terms of construction and trades businesses, we typically work with businesses that turn over from about 100,000 all the way up to about 10 million pounds per year. And then with architects and surveyors, again, turnover between 100,000 to about 5 million.
Brilliant. Good stuff. So you mentioned that you set up in 2017 and you left a job. What prompted you to do that, going back to 2017?
Actually, it kind of goes back beyond 2017. I think from when I was really young, one of the things that always kind of inspired me or interested me was entrepreneurship and business. Mm-hmm. Kind of going back, I think my earliest memory about this was probably when I was about 10, 11 years old. And I think I learned the word what entrepreneur meant. Yeah. And I said to myself, this is me. This is what I want to do. Yeah. And so I never set out to be an accountant, but I just knew I always wanted to be involved in business. And then back at when I was thinking about university, and I started, first of all, my degree in a totally different field. I kind of, although that's what I had internally, that I wanted to be involved in business, somehow I kind of went off track and ended up doing a degree in computer science. Right. And then realized it wasn't for me. I started the degree, realized it wasn't for me. And then I left that after the first year. And then I spent a couple of years doing random different things because I couldn't quite figure out what I wanted to do. Yeah. But then when I really then had started thinking about, my future and my career and so on, and I think I started a family by then as well. I got married and I had a first child as well. And I said to myself, I really need to settle down and kind of be clear on what I want to do.
Yeah.
And it was then that I then started to think about what is it that I really enjoy? What is it that I really like? And I think when I looked back, and it was a deep kind of introspection, if you like, it just that just became clear to me that how when I was about 10, 11, I kind of realized that business is what I wanted to be involved in, and then I looked back at my GCSEs and my A levels and what I really enjoyed, and business studies stood out for me. Even within my choice of subjects, that was a subject that I really enjoyed. And so then I started looking around that and thought, okay, well, what is it that I can be doing around business studies? I didn't have any ideas in terms of what kind of business I wanted to set up or anything like that, but I just wanted to get close to that area. And then one thing I realized was I wanted to go back to university. I kind of made that decision. I wanted to go back to university and kind of do something, but in the right area. And then after kind of looking into it, reading around the subject, accountancy kind of came up front. And I think it was a family friend that mentioned, about the accountant and what it does for them. And then I bought a book from Amazon on the accountancy profession and what it does. And what are the kind of roots into it and what you can do. What stood out for me about the accountancy profession was the fact that with accountants, they get to see lots of different businesses. So that's what led me into accountancy and to then to study accountancy and qualify as a chartered accountant. And then from that point onwards, I kind of saw myself at some point setting up a business, and accountancy business was kind of what naturally kind of led from that. It then took me a while to get to that position, but then 2017 was a time where I was actually in a role at the time. I was actually contracting at this company that I was working with. I was kind of working as an in-house accountant, financial controller. I went in there as a temporary 12-month maternity cover role. The company really valued the work that I did for them, and they were encouraging me to go full-time and to become a permanent employee. But I felt myself at a crossroad at the time, and I thought, well, I can go into this company. It's very well paid, very good job. I'll be comfortable. I'll be driving a company car and so on. But I just thought, is this really me? Is this what I want? And for me, I just thought that this is my opportunity now, that either I can do this or I could do what I wanted to do, which is set up a business. And the thing that kind of I suppose made me realize or go into or think about starting the business was that if I don't do this now, I'll get comfortable in my role, and 10, 20 years down the line, when I look back, I will probably regret this. And so that was the moment that I thought, well, it's either now or never. And so I made the decision that I'm going to set up a business. And I told the company, I said, look, I'm sorry. I really enjoy the company. I love working here. I love the people here, but this is not really what I want to do. And for me, I want to go and set up my own business. And if I don't do it now, I'll regret it. So I said, I'll stay here as long as you need me. I'll help you find the right person for this role to replace me. But once we found that person, I'm going to be moving on. And then 9 months later, that's exactly what I did. We found the person, we hired somebody, transitioned everything over to them, and then I left and started my business. Great.
And what did your wife think of that then? So I'm guessing that you've obviously had at least one child at that point. What did your wife think about you leaving a well-paid job with a career future?
It was very scary for her, and she's quite risk averse. And she would have preferred me to just stay in that role and at least have, this guaranteed source of income. So initially she was very apprehensive, but I think at the same time, she also realized that, I'm not going to be happy. And she realized that, that it's just not going to be, it's not for me. So even though she was apprehensive, she kind of said, look, she didn't like the uncertainty of it, but she said, look, I understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. But it, if I had the choice, I probably would have wanted you to do that. But I understand why you're doing it. So, but So throughout, obviously a business journey, you always have your ups and downs, and there's times when things are going great and you think, wow, we're going to conquer the world. Yes. And then there's other times where you think, oh my gosh, we're not going to survive. And so I've been going through those moments, but even through the down times, she's always been kind of supportive and kind of encouraging me to see the bigger picture and say, look where you've come through, look at what you've achieved over this time. It's just a matter of time, and I think you'll break through this time as well and get through it. So she's been very supportive.
Excellent. So how did you give yourself the confidence that you were going to be able to make this work? How did finding your first clients and things like that? How did you go about getting it off the ground essentially?
So when so obviously I'd made my decision to start the business. So if I take it back to 2014 was when I left a permanent job where I was working, and I actually went into the contracting world. Yep. And so that was when I set up my company. I set it up at that moment in time, knowing that this is my transition period. Yep. So I'm going to move from being a permanent full-time employee into a contractor. And the contracting was going to be my transition period to eventually me setting up my own business. So I made that decision in 2014 when I set up my company. And when I got the contracting role at the previous firm that I worked at, it was only meant to be a role for 12 months, but I ended up staying there for nearly 3.5 years. Right. as a contractor. So that was kind of my transition period. And at the same time, so when I started that role, I then started putting a bit of money aside as well to eventually kind of build up towards my business. I didn't have a lot of money. I think I started off probably with about 12 or 15,000 pounds or something like that. Mm-hmm. when I left the company. And at the same time, then what I did was I did build up a few clients that would kind of would be giving me some income, but it wasn't enough to replace my full-time income. So with that small amount of savings plus with a little bit of income coming in from those clients, that was what kind of got me started, and then from there it just grew.
Excellent. And I'd like to explore the positioning, because you said right up front that you're focused on the property sector. So was that how you started then in 2017, or did that come later?
That's really interesting actually, because I was doing a lot of reading around setting up a business and so on, and there was all this talk about how you should niche your business because it makes your marketing easier and so on, and you shouldn't be all things to all people. And so I was aware of that, but I wasn't quite sure what my niche should be. And it was interesting because whilst I was working full time, I actually took up some office space in some serviced offices, and I would work there, on weekends, because I just needed time away from the house to be able to work on the business as well. And next door to my office was a printers in the same serviced office building, and they needed some. I approached them for some business cards, and so I asked them to create some business cards, and all I did was on the back of those business cards I put on there that we're zero certified accountants, and so. It just happened so that printer then had another client who mentioned to them that they're looking for an accountant that knows zero. And so this printer then said, oh, well, I've got somebody next door who I did some business cards, so why don't you have a chat with them? That client ended up being my largest client today. And that client was in the property sector. And he was an investor and a property developer. And so he spoke to me because he wanted somebody that can help them on the zero. So I had a chat with them. My previous experience where I worked was in a property development business. So when I was the in-house accountant at the full, the role that I was doing as a contractor, that was at a property development business. So this investor client of mine, he needed help not just with zero, but he also needed help looking at his business structure and getting it set up in the right way. So I talked to him about how you can set up group structures and so on, and how businesses can do different things. And he was really impressed with the advice that I gave him. And he said to me, look, I think if you're I think you should specialize within the property sector, and I think you could do just well. You could do well from this. And I was saying to him, do you think I'll be limiting myself by just focusing on the property sector? And he said, look, from my experience, even if it's a big enough market, and you'll only be taking a small chunk of that market, but if by you specialising in the property sector, it will make you stand out from everybody else. So actually, it was that first client that then gave me that encouragement and the confidence to niche down within the property sector. And he, as he's an influencer type client as well, so he's quite big on social media, and he also used to run a property networking event as well. So he invited me to his property networking event and start networking with other property investors, and that was kind of the encouragement that I had to niche down and focus just on the property sector.
Great. So it's okay. And how, with hindsight, how's that worked for you? Because the questions that you have just articulated, I think a lot of us have when people talk about should we specialize or should we be a bit more general. We all have those concerns, I think. And one of them is, am I just going to niche myself into nothing sort of thing? So, with hindsight, do you think that was the right decision?
I think it was absolutely the right decision, because I feel that that's what helped me to grow my business quite quickly. Because what I started doing was I started just networking within the property circles. Yeah. And just by networking within property circles and also taking up speaking engagements within those networking groups, people immediately saw me as a specialist, and then they came to me for their accounting, tax advice kind of needs, and I think that really helped me, because I was probably attending maybe 3 to 4 networking events a month. So there was one event a week that I was attending in that first 3 years of the business. And because I was attending those events regularly, people were seeing me at those events, and they knew that I specialize in property. And for some of them, I was actually also sponsoring that event as well. So by sponsoring, I was able to then stand up at the beginning of the event and just introduce myself and my business and what I do. And by doing that, I was getting that visibility as well, and then that helped me to grow the business quite quickly. So I think it was definitely the right decision. Niching down in property was also the right decision. I didn't do a lot of social media at the time, although now I'm starting to do more of that. But it was just visiting those niche groups which helped me. Now, in terms of your question about whether you're limiting yourself or not by niching down, I think the way you need to look at that is that if you only got a set amount of hours that you do in a week. So whether you work 40 hours or 50 hours or 60 hours, whatever you do, you've only got a set number of hours. You only need enough clients that will help you to generate revenue and give you enough work for those 40, 50 hours. Now, you could be all things to all people, and people won't recognize you, or you could be a specialist in a particular niche and put yourself out to clients within that niche, and they will recognize you for being a specialist, and they will come to you. You only need enough clients to fill your week's worth of work that you need, the time that you have, and within the property sector, by me just niching down in the property sector, I only need a very, very small drop in the ocean of those clients. I don't even need half of that ocean, if you know what I mean. The market's too big, and I just need a very, very small, tiny percentage of that market to have a very successful business. And so by me putting all my efforts into that market and marketing myself towards those type of clients, it makes all of my marketing so much easier.
Yeah, no, very, very good. So so I think assess exactly that sort of calculation of understanding how big that market potential is, and we're combined with the ambition as to what kind of size business you want to create, or what type of business you want to create as well, helps you then to decide, okay, well, actually, I could get more than enough out of this particular sector. And as you've just beautifully demonstrated early on, that enabled you to get visibility amongst those clients, because you could identify with the kind of events that they were at, and all all relevant to your sector, but also to build that credibility then very quickly, because as you said, you're up on stage, but quickly you became recognized as an expert, somebody very credible within that field. Whereas spreading yourself thin across multiple sectors, yes, arguably you could build an expert, a reputation as being a credible accountant, but it's not the same to somebody that says, well, I'm a property developer, what do you know about my industry?
Absolutely, and I think this is when I'm having prospecting calls, it's the first thing that I talk about, and I'll say, well, there's lots of good accountants out there, and those accountants that at one day they might be dealing with, say, a hairdresser. Another time they might be dealing with a car sales business. Another time they might be dealing with another business in a different industry. So, whilst they might be good at preparing accounts, tax returns, and so on, when it comes to industry specific advice, they may not have that expertise that you might need in your business. I always give them an example of a particular client that came to us with a particular problem that needed to be resolved within a matter of days.
Right.
And because of our expertise, we were able to resolve that problem instantly for that client. Whereas if they had a general accountant, that accountant might have taken 2 or 3 days to come back to them so that they can go away and research it. And by then the client would have lost the deal.
Right.
And so when I give examples like that in prospecting calls, it kind of instantly connects with those clients and then their pain points.
Yeah, brilliant. Good. So, fairly early on, part fortuitous, but also part because then you really realized and grabbed hold of that quickly on that specialism. So from a strategic perspective, positioning the business around the property sector. So you mentioned then some of the milestones along the way. So let's pick up on some of those. So initially it was just you as you transitioned, but then it sounds like and clearly you started taking on people quite quickly. So talk us through some of the thoughts and challenges around taking on people.
So as I mentioned, so I started the business in September 2017. And so for the first year or so, I was pretty much by myself. In September 2018 was when I first hired my first employee. It was always a bit difficult because when I was growing the business at the time, it was a challenge because, what do I do? Do I focus on the admin side of things? Do I focus on onboarding clients? Do I focus on preparing accounts, tax returns? Or do I focus on marketing and all the stuff that you need to do to work on the business? And that was very, very difficult at the beginning. And I wasn't quite sure what I need to let go of and what I needed to focus on. So again, what happened was one of the clients that I was working with, that client was actually winding down their business. And so they had a team member on their team who I actually trained up, prior to, a year or so before that. So he was one of my clients that I had whilst I had my full-time job, but I helped one of the team members train them on the finances, and he was working with them and doing their zero and so on, the bookkeeping and so on. Now, because that client was winding down, that team member needed another job. Yep. And so then I said to him, I said, well, look, you've been trained up now. If you really want to develop your career in accountancy, maybe you could join us and I can help you in that direction, and you'll develop your career as well. So that was my first employee. Actually, he was very keen to work with me, and he wanted to qualify as an accountant. So I put him onto the apprenticeship program to do his qualification, but whilst also training with us as well 4 days a week. Mm-hmm. So he was my first employee. Now, I didn't have enough work for him to do on the accountancy and front, but what I gave him also was some of the admin work as well. So, onboarding some of the clients, doing some of the other admin stuff around the business. So he became kind of my first admin stroke accountant trainee. And then I think he did that for the first, a year or so, probably about 9 months or so, I would say. And then about 9 months later, then I hired, my first administrator in the business, who's kind of doing all the admin and also was assisting me as a PA as well.
Right.
That was my first hire. My next three hires actually, they're very close to each other. It was like within a few months of each other, and I hired very quickly, and I made some mistakes at the time of hiring, and those mistakes I then suffered for at least 2 years after that. And so what happened was, because the business was growing very quickly, there was lots of work coming in, but I just couldn't deliver the work, and so I needed. So one of the challenges was hiring somebody in who was a trainee, was that I thought they might be able to take a lot of the work away from me. So whilst they were able to take some of the admin stuff away from me, which is quite easy to do, but the technical work, which is the accounting, tax returns and so on, they still needed training on that. And so I found myself then having to train them. So then that was taking more time. At the same time, we didn't have good systems and processes in place. So then whilst I was training them, I was trying to build the systems and processes as well, which was taking more time. And so I was in this conundrum, should I be bringing business in? Well, I needed to bring business in to be able to start paying salaries and so on as well, and pay myself. But at the same time, I was getting more and more sucked into the business because we didn't have systems, processes in place. I had to train the staff, my staff as well. And so then what I realized that I needed to then get, people who are experienced. So I hired my administrator. I then hired my first kind of part qualified accountant. And very soon after that, I also hired a qualified accountant who I wanted to kind of manage the business for me. Mm-hmm. In that process of hiring, because I hired those three people within 3 to 4 months of each other. Right. Out of those three subsequent hires, so my first hire went well, and that person's still with me. Out of my next 3 hires, 2 went really badly wrong.
Oh, right.
And unfortunately, so I was in the position where I hired these people. They were working for me for about 6-7 months. I realized that they were the wrong people in the business. And I also spent money on paying recruitment agencies to hire these people. And then I paid 6 to 7 months worth of salaries, which kind of went down the drain. And now I had to I was in a position where I had to let them go. Yeah. So this was just before lockdown. So this is January and February 2020, sorry, that I then made the decision that I need to let my admin lady go. She wasn't the right person. And then I also had to let my qualified accountant go because they weren't the right person either. It was a very, very difficult kind of traumatic kind of period for me at the time because, I was going through all sorts of emotions as to what's going to happen. Is my business going to survive? How am I going to pick this up? And in hindsight, looking back at it, I'm so glad that I made that decision and I got rid of those people at the time, because we then went into lockdown. And had we gone into lockdown with those 2 members of staff, right, it would have drained all of the resources in the business, and we would not have survived. And so I let go of them, and I was quite fortunate with being able to recruit another admin person soon after that, and that worked out really well. So in that process, I learned a number of things.
And can I ask, because that would be good to tease those out, so what you learned. So what, and you might just have been about to cover this. What was it that made them the wrong hire? What and therefore what might you have done differently, given a do-over, if you like, given a chance to do it again?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the first thing is that I wasn't clear on who the type of person was that I wanted. Right. So when I was recruiting, I was just thinking, I need an admin person. I just got to get somebody in quick. I need an accountant. I need to get them in quick. And I didn't realize that I thought just by hiring somebody and putting them into a seat, that would just resolve my problem and take the pain away from me. But that wasn't the case. So with regards to the admin person, again, I just hired the first person that came through the door. And who was available to start immediately, not teasing out whether they're the right person for the business. Do they have the right attitude? Are they, in terms of values, do they have the same values that we have as a business? And are they gonna, are they suitable for the business? And so what happened was we're a very digital tech focused business. Constantly looking at new technology, new apps, and so on. And we hired a person who really wasn't into the tech side of things, and they just didn't relate to that side of the business. And so whenever we were trying out new apps, new technology in the business, I would get comments like, oh, another app are we going to use now? And we just had a real negative attitude towards the kind of the type of business that we were, and so over time I just realized that this person, they were a very social person. They liked the social side of things, but in terms of on the job and paying attention to detail and so on, as an administrator, they just didn't have that in them. So we would have like client correspondence, client information just being misfiled in all over the place, and the person not taking the time and the effort to think about what they're doing and doing in the right way, and then the attitude towards the business and using technology and so on wasn't very good, and then there was a lot of negative talk within the business. So they were a cancer in the business, and they were actually creating an atmosphere of a hostile kind of atmosphere within the business and creating a lot of negativity within the business. So I was getting feedback from other team members saying that, look, we don't like this person saying these or talking about these kind of things, and it's just not nice. And so I was realizing that this person just didn't have the right attitude, and they weren't the right person for the business. And so I had to let them go because of that. The other person, the accountant that I hired, they were the opposite. They were a very nice person, very good attitude, but they just didn't have the skills. They didn't have the competency, the technical ability. Because what happened was they started off in a technical role, then they moved off into a kind of managerial role, and they lost the technical side to them. And so for me, I needed them to be very good on the technical side and to lead a team and to be able to guide them on the technical aspects of the work as well as the people side as well. And so they just didn't have the technical side. Now, interestingly with that, and I'm happy to admit this, I had a test that I gave. So one of the recruiters, they said to me, said, look, we recommend that you give the person a test to do, because we can't tell you whether they can do the job or not. So it's up to you to determine whether they can do the job or not. So I had a test, and I gave the person that test to do in the interview, and they did the test and they failed the test, and I still hired them.
Right. Okay.
So because I was so desperate and I needed somebody in, I just hired them because and when they failed the test, and the reason why the person failed the test, what she said to me that in the interview was that she got a bit flustered and didn't realize that there was a test, and that she forgot her glasses and left them in the car. And so because of that, she was a bit flustered, and she wasn't able to do the test really well. And it was actually a really basic test. It wasn't even something really challenging. It was just, do you know how to prepare accounts? Here's a mock set of data, prepare some accounts from this. And they failed on that. And I, in my desperation of wanting to get somebody in and wanting to get a manager in, and because I saw the people side in that person, I thought, okay, well, they got the people side. They might not be that good on the technical side. I might be able to compensate for that. But actually, that was a wrong decision, because what happened was, as soon as that person came in, within a week, the other two team members that I had, because I had obviously the first team member that I mentioned, then I hired a second team member who was a part qualified accountant. Within a week, both of them had lost. They didn't have respect for this manager of theirs, and I didn't know this until many months later. And in fact, after I had let go of the person, then my other team member, the part qualified accountant, said, within a week, I said to my colleague that she doesn't know what she doesn't know anything about her stuff. She's not a good accountant. And so the team had lost confidence in that team member within a week, and I didn't realize that. So again, what I realized from this experience was that I think my gut was telling me that this is not the right person when I interviewed them, but my desperation for hiring somebody overruled that gut, if you like. And I kind of went ahead with that person. But in hindsight, that was a mistake. So since then, we tightened up our processes. I was the two things that I was hiring for is attitude was number one.
Yep.
I made sure that the person had the right attitude, they had the right values, and they would be a fit for in the business. And that from a skills perspective, that they had the right skills. And I didn't compromise on those two qualities. And after that, we hired another 6 or 7 people, and every single one of those hires was the right hires, and we didn't make the same mistakes in our hiring process. Now, some of those people didn't stay; they moved on. Perhaps the role wasn't for them, or so on. But nevertheless, I was confident that we hired the right person, and so that was a lesson learned. That recruitment, from my experience, was such an important aspect of the business, and you can't afford to get it wrong. And we suffered so by hiring those 2 people, and up until, I would say, up until March this year, we were still feeling the brunt of that mistake,
Right.
because we had built up a backlog of work, and we then lockdown came in. Recruitment became even more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So we struggled to hire. So we let go of our of that accountant in February 2020. It then took us another 6 to 7 months to recruit another person into that role.
Right.
And bearing in mind, we hired that person around about September 2019. So it took us a year from when we needed that person in that role, we got the right person in the role. But in that process, we hired somebody, we paid a lot of money to recruitment agencies, and we paid a salary. And then we had to go through the traumatic experience of telling somebody that we're going to let them go.
Yeah, no, it's such a good illustration of the cost of a bad hire. And, it's a trap that's so easy for us all to, well, most of us would have done it if we've hired people in the past, as you hire out of desperation a little bit, rather than taking it a little bit more slowly, and making sure that you get the right person at the end of the day. And I suspect everybody listening will be able to think of examples of that. And I doubt very much if anybody would put the other side forward, which is and say that yes, we had success when we we just hired the first person that came along, or the one that fitted the bill. So it is always worth spending a bit more time to make sure you get the right person.
Absolutely. 100%.
Very good. So you have managed to recruit though since then. So how have you managed to, in a world where it is difficult to recruit, so how have you managed to attract some good people into Bluewater?
So as I mentioned, so within during the lockdown, we struggled to recruit locally. So because of the pandemic, there was a lot of uncertainty in the economy at the time. So people who were in jobs were reluctant to move jobs because of all the uncertainty in the economy. They didn't know where they stood. A lot of firms who were putting people on furlough. So people were in jobs, but a lot of people were probably getting furlough as well. And so they were reluctant to move jobs because of all the uncertainty. So we had to pivot. And one thing that we realized was that because we were struggling to recruit in the UK, and we were desperately in need of people to help us, we then started looking abroad. And because one thing we realized during lockdown was that as a business, we can actually work remotely.
Yeah.
And we were working remotely quite successfully. So then the thought came to mind, well, if we are working remotely, do we need to recruit somebody that has to be, in Birmingham or even local to us, or can we recruit further afield? So but the challenge in the UK was trying to recruit during lockdown. And so then what we decided to do was that, we decided to look abroad. So we started looking at outsourcing. Can we outsource some of our work to some outsourcing companies? So there's outsourcing firms within the accounting industry where you can outsource, so you can hire accountants, say in India, Philippines, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, those places where you get qualified people, accountants who can do the work for you at a cheaper cost. So we tried outsourcing, and that didn't really work for us with the company that we worked with. But what happened was then I actually also then thought, well, what if we hired somebody directly and not necessarily outsourced? So we hired somebody directly in Pakistan, And that worked really, really well. And till now that person is still with us.
Right.
And so then what from that, because we pivoted, then we decided, okay, well, if we're struggling to recruit locally, let's go abroad and let's find people. And we did that. That worked really well, the way we hired directly. Because we learned from our outsourcing experience and how things didn't work, I then thought, well, actually, we could probably fix that part of it, and we can grow a team externally, and we could potentially, there's an opportunity to create a separate business here, a separate outsourcing business. And so essentially that's what we've done. So I've now got a separate business, an outsourcing business, where I've got a team of accountants in Pakistan who are trained, qualified, and they work for us. And now we're offering outsourcing services to other accountancy firms that are struggling with recruitment.
Interesting idea.
And so what we've done is we've actually just taken on our first external client now. And so we've got a firm up in Scotland who they're based on one of the islands of Scotland, and they are struggling to recruit people locally. There's no accountants on that island apart from this one firm. And they needed, the firm's growing because they're the only firm of accountants on the island. Everybody's coming to them for accountancy. All the small businesses are coming to them. Yeah. But they are struggling to recruit, and so they don't want to turn business away. So now they've come to us to assist them, and so we're now helping them with the accounts. So the person who's got the firm, they are growing the business, and we're doing the operational side for them.
Great. So really good example there, where you've had a challenge within the business which is faced by other accountants, and not only have you found a way to solve your own challenge, but essentially you've created another business now which is helping other accountants to solve that challenge. So yeah,
absolutely
love it. So and that must give you another headache in a way, though. Now you've got two businesses, and you've got a team of people in the UK, and you've got some people in Pakistan. So how are you managing now to coordinate all of those activities and make sure people are doing the right things?
That's a good question. So obviously, I've been focused on one of the things that I had in mind is that I want my businesses to run without me. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always thinking, what is it that I need to do to ensure that these businesses can run without me? And the kind of the thing that I have, the metric that I use, I say to myself, if I was to go away for 3 months and switched off my phone, switched off my emails, what do I need to do, or what does my business need to look like for me to come back after 3 months and to find that my business has not just stayed where it is, but it's actually grown without me. Yeah. And ultimately it comes down to systems and processes. And that's something that I've been really, really keen and working on. So as we were building the business, I was really hot on putting systems and processes in place. And so now, as I was growing my team as well, and as I was recruiting new team members, once I was training them on the process, I was then saying to them, I want you to learn from the process and what I've taught you. I want you to think about how we can improve this process, and then I want you to write up a manual for it.
Okay.
And so this is still work in progress, so we haven't actually completed this, but we made good inroads into this now, and pretty much in all aspects of the business now, we've got systems and processes in place, we've got checklists in place, and so on. So even if it comes to preparing accounts, tax returns, and so on, which is the technical side, there's a whole process that we have to go through, and there's a checklist for each area, each aspect of the work that needs to be completed by the team member, just to make sure that the quality is there and the standard is there, and then they're not leaving any stone unturned in that process. And so that's what we've been doing. We've been creating internal guides, written guides, and we've also created videos around those processes as well, so that new team members can get onboarded quickly and they can get trained up on that process very quickly. With the outsourcing business, because it's a team based in Pakistan, I actually I've got a business partner in that business. So I've got a friend of mine who's also a qualified accountant, who I worked with, and we trained at the same firm together. But then he moved to Pakistan and settled there and started working in a corporate role there. But he then expressed an interest of kind of setting up his own business, and we got talking, and so we said, well, what about if we did this together? We've both got experience in this field. You could kind of manage that outsourcing business, and I can help with the lead generation side and bring in the business, and you can oversee the service delivery side and the operational side of it. And so that's how that bit is being managed.
Excellent. Oh, very, very good. And just a question then around the process and documentation of that. Is this you mentioned videos? Is this electronic guides that you've got in a folder somewhere, or is it a physical thing? How have you actually captured them, and how do you make sure then that people keep on top of them and that they actually follow them and update them where necessary?
Yeah, so what we started was we started just writing up the process just in a Word document initially, just to kind of get them drafted, and then what we did was I started looking for some apps that we could use, and so there was an app called Trainual that we used. Yep. So it's trainual.com. So as in the word train and manual without the M-A-N, so Trainual. So we used that initially, and we documented all our process in there. That's quite good the way it's designed. It helps you to kind of break down each process step by step, and you can add videos and so on to it, and even attach documents and stuff to that. So that's what we did initially, and that really worked well for us. But then what we decided, we then started using another app, because we were using a lot of different apps for different things. So then we were looking at how can we consolidate the number of apps that we're using, so that we're using one app that does more than one thing. And so we were using an app called Notion now. So Notion is basically a tool that you can use, and you can create what you want. So you can create you can create databases within that. You can create pretty much anything that you want. So we use Notion now, which is like our company knowledge portal, if you like, or company wiki, if you like. So it's all in one place. So in terms of our policies and procedures, staff handbooks, other notes and guidances that the staff need, it's all in one place. Within that now we've also got a section in there where we've got training for different areas, and we've got everything documented within Notion, and that's something that we're just constantly improving. Then we also use other kind of tools as well, where we've got for our individual jobs, we've got separate kind of spreadsheets that we use and so on, and within those we've got those checklists built into them. So we use a combination of tools, but ultimately Notion is our main place now, where we're holding all that knowledge and operational process of the company in one place.
Brilliant. Sounds excellent. Good. All right. And you mentioned right at the very beginning that you started the business with 10 or 12,000 pounds, something that order. How does the business model work? Have you been able to finance the growth of the business from the cash flow, or have you had to take in other investment? How's that worked for you?
That's a good question. So that £12,500 probably did carry me for the first few years. So first few months it carried me, but I was able to build up a cash flow, to kind of continue beyond that. So what happened was, with our clients, all our clients are monthly retainers. So so from day one, all of our clients were on monthly retainers. So what we had was, as I was onboarding new clients, our revenue each month was increasing, because those services were to cover a 12-month period. But they were paying us on a monthly basis, so that helped with the cash flow initially. And then and then what happened was, up until recently, in fact last year, because we were growing the business, and as I mentioned, because we had suffered by hiring the wrong people, we then hired replaced those hires. But the difficulty that we had was, then we built up a backlog of work. And then we were struggling. We were in a position that we had so much work on that we couldn't onboard new clients. And so then there was a period that we stopped taking new work on, because we had just built up a backlog of work and we couldn't service the clients. And so that then took a hit on our cash flow, because we obviously hired up, but we didn't have the work. We didn't have enough revenue to support that. So I then started looking at getting investment into the business. And so I actually then issued some shares in the business, and we got some investment into the business that way, and that's helped us since then. And so we don't have any external kind of borrowings or debt or anything like that. But I then gave some shares in the business, and it was all kind of done privately, so I didn't go into like it was just done privately, basically, through my own network and through contacts. And I just said to people, look, we're offering, I recorded a few videos, just kind of explaining what the opportunity was. I then kind of, through my own network, I just said, look, I kind of narrowed it down to a few people, about 15, 20 people that I thought either might be able to invest or they might know somebody who might be able to invest. So I kind of then kind of privately reached out to them, shared a link to the video and said, look, this is what I'm looking to raise investment in the business. If you know of anybody that might be interested, then please ask them to get in touch. So some of those people were interested themselves, and some of them, they then passed out that to their network, and then through that, I started having conversations, and we got about 3 or 4 investors that were happy to come on board.
Very good. Now, don't give away anything that you're not comfortable giving away, but I'd love to explore that. So, first of all, what sort of percentage of the business did you give away?
So the way we structured it was that that they would get a percentage of the growth of the business.
So you did growth shares.
Yeah, so that's right. So they would get a percentage of the growth of the business, and they. What we then did was, the way we set it up was that we set it up so that effectively there's an option to buy them back out. Okay. And the idea is that within 5 years that we buy them back out of the business. So whatever the percentage of the growth is, effectively they get a stake of that growth. And then we buy them out after within 5 years. So either we buy them out, or after 5 years they can exercise the option to buy themselves out.
And how have you defined the value, if you like? Because that's often a question: is what's I'm going to give. So I know you've helped it a little bit with the fact that you've done growth shares as opposed to giving away a share of your currently essentially where you are, but how have you done the calculation then on what they're buying in at and then what they'll be bought out at in 5 years' time? How does that work?
So the way we did that was, so again, I had to do it in a way that people would understand, and I had a way of I kind of explained how normally accounting businesses are valued to the investors, but what I did was I kind of based it on a multiple of turnover. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, look, whatever the turnover is today, however much the average annual turnover increases over the next 5 years, you'll get a percentage of that growth effectively. Yeah. And we had a multiple that we agreed on, and that multiple is basically it's in the contract, it's in the agreement. So essentially, we don't need an external valuation or anything like that. It's just based on what the average growth is over the next few years.
Like it. So keeping it nice and simple. And then what happens in 5 years' time if there's an option to buy back, but you don't have to? Is that what you're saying there? Or?
Yeah. So I think after 3 years I can exercise the option to buy them out, and after 5 years they can exercise the option to be bought out.
Okay. Brilliant. Very good. Very interesting. Really, really like it. Okay, good. So 1 or 2 questions just now we're coming towards the hour, I think. So 1 or 2 questions. If you were to go back to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself, or perhaps what would you do differently, given the benefit of hindsight?
This is a really interesting question. So this morning I was having a chat with my son on the way in. He was going to go to an exam, so I was going to drop him off to his exam in the morning. And he's currently doing his GCSEs, and I was asking him about what he wants to do post exams and so on. And it was just interesting, just having the discussion with him, because he's at this crossroads and he's not quite sure which way he wants to go. So I guess reflecting on my own experience and looking back at my own learnings, I think I got distracted along the way, and as I mentioned in my when I was discussing kind of my journey, and it was probably I must have been about 10, 11 when I realized that entrepreneurship and business is what I was interested in. But I think I got a little bit distracted along the way and went into something totally different, and a field that I didn't really enjoy, which is computer science. And so I guess the key thing is that I would simply say that you just need to think, really have a deep think as to what is it that you enjoy, what is it that try and find what is it that makes you tick, what is it that gives you that energy and enthusiasm to kind of go out and do something. And in my case, it was all about business. Yeah. And had I kind of realized that when I was younger, I probably would have started much earlier. Yeah. In business as well. And so my advice to my younger self would be is to really try and find what your passion is, figure it out, and really pursue that.
Brilliant. In terms of your marketing, in terms of finding new customers, what's worked for you the best? What is the one thing that you think has helped you most?
So definitely the networking definitely helped me. Definitely not just networking, but getting as much exposure during those networking events as possible. So networking is mingling one-to-one with people, but actually if you could stand up in front of an audience and say who you are, what you do, that's far more powerful. And an example of that is that one of our best clients I got was just simply from a networking group, and it was a group that we sponsored, and as part of that sponsorship, I was able to stand up in front of that group for literally 2 minutes and just say who I am, what I do, and how we help people. And by doing that, I had somebody then approach me and say, well, they've got a particular problem and they need help with that. And so there was some tax planning that they needed, and that they weren't getting with their current accountant. So it was something that I was able to help them with. And we got a nice one-off piece of revenue from that one-off piece of work. But then as a result of that client then came on board as a client. So we started doing, helping them with their ongoing accounting needs, but they also then brought their son on board with us, and they also brought their daughter on board with us as well. And so we now deal with the whole family's, accounts, tax returns, and they are a very good client for us, and they generate, we generate good revenue from that. So again, if I think about what was it? It was the fact that perhaps if I was just mingling with people, maybe I might not even had a chance to get around to them. Yeah. But the fact that I was able to stand up in front of the audience and say, this is who I am, this is what we do, this is how we help our clients, come and talk to me if you think we can help you. Yeah. They then reached out to me. Yeah.
So it affords you not only the opportunity to be seen by everybody there, but actually it affords you a certain amount of credibility by the fact that you've been asked to come up on stage, and therefore there's that inferred credibility there as well, isn't there? Which is
absolutely. And then speaking engagements as well. So within those networking groups, because a lot of these networking groups, they're always looking for people to come and speak as well. And so if you get those opportunities where you can add value and maybe have 10, 15, 20 minutes to do a presentation where you're giving away value to the audience, that then positions you as somebody who's credible, somebody who knows what they're talking about, somebody who's a specialist, and then people will actually reach out to you. So that's definitely something that has had a lot of success. And more recently now, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build out our social media profile. So we've started doing video content. We started writing blogs. We're building up our YouTube channel. So we're at the very early stages of that, but this is something that we're now trying as well.
Very good. So what does the next 5 years hold? If you and I are having this conversation in 5 years' time, Ahmad, what has to have happened for you to consider them a success?
I think for me, if I could work in the next 5 years, if I could set up the business in such a way and develop it in such a way, I'd like to be in a position where I would probably only be involved in my business for maybe 1 or 2 days a week. Okay. And I've got a team that can do all aspects of the business, and I'm just kind of overseeing it, kind of guiding them, but not necessarily being involved in it 5 days, 6 days a week like I'm at the moment.
Brilliant. Very good. And you mentioned a couple already. Something I like to ask everybody is what apps or software have you found to be particularly helpful in your business? You've already mentioned Trainial and Notion.
Yeah. So when it comes to finance apps, I would say definitely Xero. That's what we use in our business. That's what we also specialize in. That's what we recommend to all our clients. But it's not just about using Xero. It's getting it set up in the right way as well. And so it's worth putting that investment in getting it set up in the right way so that you can generate the right reports for you and so on. And then there's other apps that can add on to Xero if you want to get better quality reporting out of Xero, because Xero reporting is pretty basic. But you can use apps like Fathom and Sift, which are reporting tools. Another app that I would recommend is, for business that want to manage their cash flow, day-to-day cash flow, I'd recommend that you use Float, which also adds on to Xero, but it's a very good app to help you manage, to help you to understand what is your cash position going to be like in a week's time, in a month's time. What about if you were to win this project? How will your cash position be like if you were to take that project on? If you were to take on an additional employee and you had that cost, what will your cash look like if you had that additional, expense of having that employee? So that's kind of on the finance front. I definitely recommend CRM systems. So obviously for each industry, for each business, you need to look at what is it that you need from your CRM system, but definitely have a central system where you're tracking all of your leads coming in and your customers and so on. We use Pipedrive for that.
Okay.
In our business. So we use Pipedrive. We also use an email marketing system. So we use, it used to be called Infusionsoft. It's now called Keep. So we use Keep for our email marketing. And then, each industry will probably need software for their specific industry. And you need to, like, for example, we use a practice management system to kind of once a prospect has become a client, then we need to manage other aspects of their business, like, the deadlines for their accounts, tax returns, and so on. So we use a practice management system in our business to help us with that.
Excellent. Very good. No, really good. And I think you're a bit of a reader as well. So are there any particular books that you'd recommend?
Definitely. So I think the book that had initially that had a really good impact on me, which was about setting up a business, was Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. That was a really good book just to kind of get out of the employee into the self-employed and business owner mindset. After that book, I think the book that I really enjoyed was The E-Myth Revisited, which is a really good book on how every small business should be thinking about systemizing their business and eventually selling their business. Even though you may not want to sell your business, but if you think about one day of an exit, it will then help you to build up a business that is saleable. Essentially, because ultimately, if a business that is relying on an individual, and if that individual is taken out of business, the business owner, then that business really won't have a value to it. But if you build a business and it's systemized, and by taking the business owner out of the business can still continue and run, then suddenly that's a valuable business that somebody will be paying good money for. So that was kind of the book. And then more recently, in terms of into marketing and so on, I've been reading the Story Brand, which is a book about how you position and market yourself, and how you kind of target your key audience. And that's been a really good book in terms of marketing.
Yeah, brilliant. Excellent. Some really good advice there. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, Ahmad, and I think there's been some excellent tips, and I love the way you've gone about scaling your business and the way you're thinking through the challenges and looking for creative solutions to things that other people might just go, oh, well, it's just the way it is. So I think some really good lessons in here for all of us listen to. So thank you very much for also for being so open and sharing real stuff. That was excellent. If people would like to get hold of you or Bluewater, what's the best way for them to do that, Ahmad?
So I'm available on LinkedIn and Facebook. So if you just Google me, Ahmad Qayyum, you'll find me on LinkedIn and Facebook. I'm also on Instagram, although I don't use Instagram very much, but LinkedIn and Facebook. Also, in terms of our website, we are bluewater.co.uk. You can always get in touch directly through the website.
Brilliant. So we'll put those in the show notes. And the spelling of Ahmad, by the way, for people listening, is AHMAD, and Qayyum is QAYYUM. So, but we'll put that in the show notes. But Ahmad, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
Don't forget to take a look at www.bizsmarts.co.uk to access a great range of resources to help you in your scale-up journey. So that's bizsmarts.co.uk, which is bizsmarts.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.